Hey there folks, the #1 Japanese breakfast fan from the Infinite Jukebox. Here's another quick album review, and today I wanted to talk about the new Japanese breakfast record for Melancholy Brunettes, parentheses, and Sad Women, end parentheses. Japanese Breakfast have been a popular band for like nearly a decade at this point, and I think people kind of forget that sometimes and treat them like new kids on the block still. But 2021's Jubilee admittedly did take them to new heights, both creatively and commercially, and following the creative and commercial success of that aforementioned record, as well as multiple Grammy nominations, including a nomination for Best New Artist, Michelle Zauner and company return for Melancholy Brunettes and Sad Women, and despite being a solid enough record with a handful of highlights that I do genuinely enjoy, I don't know, it just still feels like a step down from the group's previous works. I'm not going to pretend like I'm not disappointed by this one. Now, admittedly, for Melancholy Brunettes and Sad Women, it does retain a lot of the best positive qualities of previous Japanese breakfast records and their most memorable tracks. I mean, Michelle Zauner has a gorgeous voice, and that does not change here in any capacity. I mean, even in the weakest and most unremarkable moments found in the track list here, she still sounds nothing short of lovely. Her vocal style even kind of suits the more singer-songwriter-oriented instrumentation and general nature of the band's latest effort, as she does have a sort of personable yet tonally striking vocal style that makes her a solid performer for this kind of sound. And the entire record is, as you may expect if you are familiarized with their back catalog, very well produced, performed very well, it feels spacious, and each member of Japanese Breakfast is very musically competent and confident as well, with the performers not really having any notable misses here instrumentally either, despite not really having any highlights either, if I'm being honest. And in those senses, for Melancholy Brunettes and Sad Women is put together and executed extremely well, but then again, it also doesn't feel like anything compared to some of their other works, which I think is a shame. In my eyes, where the record most heavily falls flat is the moments where it kind of feels like in this change in direction sonically, Japanese Breakfast lose a little bit of their personality and creative identity along the way, which is kind of a bummer. I mean, much of the record is made up of this sort of folksy indie pop rock instrumentation that I don't think is nearly as unique as, for example, the trippy dream pop of a record like Soft Sounds from Another Planet, and the alt-country influences of certain tracks like Picture Window feel especially tired at this point, with a lot of the creative direction seen on this record being extraordinarily common within general indie music in the last couple of years. I think that there's been a bit of an oversaturation of that alt-country sound that has been perfectly pulled off by some artists and very mediocrely pulled off by others, and I would say that this record is somewhere in the middle, leaning towards the latter, which obviously is not necessarily the best, but the more lush and instrumentally fleshed out songs such as Honey Water, for example, tend to work the best. Not the best that Japanese Breakfast has to offer overall, but certainly the better tracks here tend to be within that category, but unfortunately those songs are in themselves few and far between each other. And now I do think it would be unfair to say that Japanese Breakfast are becoming lazy or anything like that. That would just be an absolute insult to the artists in question, but for Melancholy Brunettes and Sad Women, it does feel noticeably more uninspired and predictable than anything else they've put out in recent years, and whereas I feel that most of their past work has felt uniquely theirs and really just Japanese Breakfast exclusively, this album kind of feels like it could have been released by a plethora of other active artists in the modern day, and I think that's kind of a bummer because that's not really something I could say about a lot of other Japanese Breakfast records up to this point. Now, even despite this not being the most interesting thing the band have ever put out, for Melancholy Brunettes and Sad Women is still a decent record. I mean, the instrumentals are well performed, and Michelle Zauner is as strong of a vocalist as she has ever been, which is really the, in my eyes, main selling point of Japanese Breakfast in a lot of ways. It just feels like a true shame that Japanese Breakfast's latest album doesn't really feel like Japanese Breakfast, exactly. I mean, the new direction is certainly welcome for the sake of keeping things fresh. I will never dock a band points or have less respect for them for trying something new. I love to see that, but it just feels like this is the band accidentally stumbling into trend-chasing, folk-influenced sounds that are popularized within indie music and have been for the past few years at this point, more so than it does them truly reinventing themselves. I'm not saying that they didn't try to do something new, they obviously did. It just feels like they weren't really able to execute these sounds in a way that feels that distinct from a number of other musicians at this point, even if what is here is pretty solid overall. But as a whole, when the Jeff Bridges feature on Men in Bars is like one of the most interesting things this record has to offer, I don't think that's really a good sign for the rest of it, because, I mean, it's Jeff Bridges, so, you know, do with that information what you will. I'm going to give this record 3 stars out of 5. And with that being said, that is the end of this quick album review. Thank you for watching The Infinite Jukebox, and I'll see you in the next one.